That the library is running, and we hope you will attend. This Sunday we're having open house in honor of the fact that this building is 20 years old on Sunday. We will have from 3 to 5 refreshments and entertainment, and we hope to see you there. And on Tuesday evening, November 1st, the library is running an international cooking program from 7 to 9 p.m. We're starting out programs on the first Tuesday of every month in the evening, so if you'd like to come, we'd love to have you. Also, November 3rd, Seton Hall is running a program on the making of the president with well-known Republican and Democratic politicians. It really should be interesting, and I hope that you'll attend that too. I have information on it, but after the program, please see me. November 3rd. I also would like to thank my friend and co-worker, Pamela Forster-Brandon, for the beautiful flowers that she arranges and brings in every week from her garden that's on the table. And I want to thank Blair Tilley from Columbia High School for coming again and videotaping our program so that we have 35 on Wednesday. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you a very notable lawyer, very important one, who not only knows about what's happening with surrogate motherhood, but was directly involved with the Stearns and probably helped write the laws regarding it. So without any further ado, please let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Gary Skoloff.
I figure that 1 out of 2 of you here either knows me, my mother, or we all live somewhere on Bergen Street and Lyons Avenue. My God. Absolutely. Let me talk to you for about 20 minutes, and then we'll talk and have a discussion and yell about this problem. But let me just briefly outline to you where I'm coming from and how I see it. To me, the Baby M case stands for the basic proposition that the legal profession failed to keep up with modern medical technology. Even worse, the fact that we had 50 legislatures in 50 states that never kept up with basic modern medical technology. In other words, surrogacy really has been around for well over a decade. It's been going on. And despite that, not one state in 50 ever had any legislation on the subject. And then along comes a series of surrogacy situations, and then finally comes V1, Stern-Whitehead. And so now all of a sudden, everybody's looking at it. But you got to look at it in this context. The single most extraordinary statistic that came out of that whole litigation, and which was a total shock to me and something I'd never even thought about, is the fact that we have in this country a 15% infertility rate, which means 1 out of 7 married couples in the United States of America are infertile. A shocker. It never occurred to me, something I never thought about. And what really happened to me was that I had no close friends who were infertile, and therefore it just never came up. Something I just never thought about. And they base it, their statistics are 40% the woman is infertile, 40% the man is infertile, 20% they cannot come up with any scientific reason as to why it's happened. Even worse, in light of this whole surrogacy problem, is that the infertility rate is going up. In this great country, with all the scientific strides that we have made, they not only cannot figure out ways yet to really cure it, but that it's increasing primarily for 3 different reasons. One is that women are marrying older, and because they marry older, each year you increase slightly the chance of infertility. Secondly is, which I happen to enjoy a bit, is women are going out into the workforce. They go out into that workforce, stress, pressure, and stress and pressure are a very significant aspect of infertility. So that's increased it. And then third, and the most frightening for our children and our grandchildren, is that the air we breathe the water we drink. See, because I'm on this same kind of a program with doctors all over the place, and I'm listening to them say this over and over again, saying the air we breathe, the water we drink, where are we going, is increasing the fertility rate because it's less and less healthy than when all of us were much younger. All that together is increasing the infertility rate. So that's really why this case and this situation is so extraordinarily significant. This is no simple little incidental situation that happens at 1 out of 10 million. It is to an awful lot of people. Adoption simply does not exist. Pure and simple. Anybody who says adoption is a viable option does not know what's going on in the real world. There are no children to adopt. Period. They are, people I know right now are out in Chile somewhere trying to adopt a child in Chile, South America. There are no children for the obvious reason. A, abortion is legal, and B, it is now absolutely acceptable for a single woman to be pregnant, have a child, and keep it. That is socially acceptable right now. Was that so 20 years ago? Are you kidding? You have black shades, you put down the window. Nobody ever talked about it. It's a whole different world. As a result, adoption is out. I made the argument that surrogate parenting is much better than adoption for two separate reasons. One, you got the blood of one of the two parents in the child, which just is that much better than a pure cold adoption. And two, with all the health requirements that would be put into place, you would know that everybody involved in the process is mentally and physically healthy. Because if you've been reading the New York Times the last couple of weeks, they're talking about this extraordinary percentage of children being born whose mothers are alcoholics and drug addicts. The day the kids are born, they're addicted. My God. Well, in surrogate parenting, they're going to put in all these safeguards which would exclude those kinds of women. So I say it's the best of all. Seriously speaking, what is the American dream for almost everybody? Happy marriage, home, children. That's what we were all brought up with. That's what we bring our kids up with, right? Cut through everything else, have a good marriage, get a nice home, raise kids. The pain for any couple who is not able to have a child is unbearable. They go crazy. If anybody in this room, God forbid, has a child who's infertile, they know everything I'm saying, or you even got a close friend. You got a friend who's got a child who's infertile. You know what I'm talking about. It becomes encompassing, all-encompassing with them. It becomes the single most serious aspect of their life. And they go through doctor after doctor. The definition of infertility, by the way, is 1 year of attempting to have a child and unable to do so. That's the simple medical definition. 1 year you can't become pregnant, somebody's infertile, something is wrong. And then they go from one specialist to another specialist to another specialist. See, I have become an expert on all this because of all the women who come and talk to me. I walk down the street in New York City. The only people who can recognize me, whether I'm wearing a jacket and tie or I'm wearing a jeans and a sweatshirt, is an infertile woman. As soon as they walk up and start talking to me, I know them. And I stop and I listen to them because I was their last hope. And of course, they're not getting anywhere at the moment. But they are consumed by it. They've got a husband who's successful, they're successful, they got a house, and there are no little kids running around. And they want little kids. They can't get them by adoption, and so therefore surrogate parenting. So I argue that surrogate parenting actually increases traditional family values. Now, what I have found to be the most commonly voiced objection to it is the so-called, quote, commercialized aspects of it, that the woman gets paid. And I can understand that as being very objectionable, and especially everybody who thinks in terms of adoption, that we don't want to start selling babies, which of course is the big argument. Isn't this really baby selling? But I say from a philosophical point of view, there's nothing immoral about the process. That in our society right now, we have considerable commercial trafficking with regard to parenting. To begin with, in the adoption process. If anybody here knows anybody who adopted, do you know what it cost them? A fortune. It cost a fortune to adopt a child. So don't give me this, we're paying a surrogate mother, we're making a commercial. We pay an adoption $10,000 easy all the time. Sperm donors receive fees for their genetic contributions. Ovum donors, they get paid for their genetic contributions. Commercialized social parenting is today's norm. Don't we pay for daycare facilities, babysitters, wet nurses, nannies? It's really all into the same situation. And isn't foster parenting. commercialized parenting, subsidized by the state. Then they talk about potential harm to the child. Well, I got to tell you, there are no studies on it. Nobody knows. It's just a tremendous guessing game. And my view is, you bring a kid into a family that really wants that kid's going to do okay. So I'm not sure that that's any kind of an argument. And if you want to make arguments about harm to the child, then you got to talk about what's the harm to the child in the adoption situation, where they're both strangers, in the divorce situation, one out of two couples, plenty of harm to children there, step parenting, blended families, all of that. I say, can you imagine a child more dearly wanted and with better prospects of being loved and well taken care of than a child who's born out of a surrogate parenting arrangement, with all that you got to go through before you can get that thing to work? Now, unfortunately, and including my Supreme Court, they blended in adoption with surrogate parenting. And in effect, what the Supreme Court decision said, which reversed the trial judge, is that it's like adoption, surrogate parenting, and therefore it violated the adoption statutes. And I argued, and still argue at this moment, they were wrong, that there's a world of difference between surrogate parenting and adoption. The policy considerations that are involved in adoption do not apply to surrogate parenting. Remember, in adoption, you've got a natural parent who's delivering a child to a stranger. In adoption, the woman is always under considerable emotional stress, psychological stress, probably all the time financial stress. It is an unwanted child in an adoption situation. Contrast that to surrogate parenting. The child is being delivered to the natural biological father. In surrogate parenting, the child is a wanted child. The child is a planned child. An agreement was made between the surrogate mother and the biological father before the child was created. So I say all these safeguards that you do need in adoption, you don't need in surrogate parenting because it's a whole different situation. The basic goal of surrogate parenting is a good social purpose. It is the creation of a family. Got to tell you what I really think the real question is. To me, the real question is, and how I present it normally, I'm not going to present it now for the obvious reason. What I generally say is, I say to all the women in this audience, but the women in this audience are a little older than usual. So then I say, we'll say to you, in terms of your daughters and younger women, don't they, and granddaughters, don't they have the right to make the decision? If a woman over 21 years of age, of sound mind of body, says, I really want to give the gift of life to an infertile couple, I would like to do it. And another couple says, we dearly want a child and we would love for you to be the surrogate mother. And we go through all the normal procedures and all whatever safeguards there should be, with mental and physical examinations for everybody. I say, what's wrong with that? Why shouldn't it be? You got all these infertile couples out here who are dying to have kids. You got women who said, I'm willing to do it. I heard great arguments made in Washington last month by a woman who got up and said, if I go and take a second job so my kids can go to college, is that okay? Yeah. Well, if instead of taking a second job, I say I'll work my regular job and I'll be a surrogate mother so I get that extra 10 grand so I can send my kid to college, I want to do it, they want to do it. What's wrong with that? And I thought it was a great way of just presenting it. And that has been my argument. Unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, it hasn't carried as of yet. I say that in this country, a woman has a right to make that decision herself. And that if she wishes to be a surrogate mother, she should be allowed to do it. What is now happening is, there are others who are saying, a woman is incapable of making that choice. She may not make that choice. We're going to enact legislation that says, in effect, she may not do it, even though she wants to do it. And that's what's happening today. Now, there was a famous United States Supreme Court decision about 15 years ago called Eisenstaedt Decision by our best justice of our U.S. Supreme Court out of our own state, William J. Brennan, who still sits there waiting for the election in the hopes that he'll be the right person to replace him when he retires. He's waiting till next month. Unfortunately, you may be waiting for no good reason, but that's another topic. Justice Brennan said in the Eisenstaedt Decision, let me just read it to you, one sentence. If the right of privacy means anything, it is the right of the individual, married or single, to be free from unwarranted governmental intrusion into matters so fundamentally affecting a person as a decision whether to bear or beget a child. He was saying, in effect, that it's the last place in the world that government should intrude into family matters. Unless it's absolutely, absolutely necessary, let consensual adults make their own decisions. Because as you know, bureaucracy builds. Once it begins, it goes, and it goes. I was totally shocked when we reached the New Jersey Supreme Court. There were 15 amicus curiae briefs, which means briefs submitted by groups outside of the lawyers actually litigating the case. Out of the 15 briefs that were submitted, 13 of them were against surrogacy. All 13 of them were from women's groups and adoption groups. And I said, I don't get it, because I figured for every women's group against it, there'd be another women's group who would say, even though I personally don't like it, I am not going to have government telling me what I can do and not do with my body. And yet, all of these extreme groups filed all these amicus curiae briefs, which may have been the turning point. I don't know. We'll never know. And in fact, what they said was they wanted the state of New Jersey to become involved in a family matter as basic as having a child. As basic as saying that a woman cannot be allowed to decide that she wishes to give the gift of life to an infertile couple who cannot have their own child. Brennan, in that decision, said the United States has a strong commitment to individual liberty. And in societies that value liberty, he said, individuals must be free to act without governmental restriction. And to the contrary, we're now seeing a wave of legislation that's taken us the other way, that is actually starting to say, government will make the decision, and the decision is that we'll allow surrogate parenting only if there is no money paid, and only if after birth the surrogate mother has a choice. Which, of course, to me means no, it'll never work. It cannot be. Tell you what I'm really saying to you. Surrogate parenting is here to stay. It ain't never going away. If they really are going to declare it illegal, I will tell you, it's going to simply just move into the back alleys like abortion. Because you just got to talk to one couple who want a child and can't have a child. They will find a relative, they will find a friend, they will find somebody to hire, they will travel as far as they have to go. They want that child, they will have the child. There is no way out of it. My proposal that I have recommended as I've lectured around the country is as simple as this. That there ought to be, you got to have a statute enacted so we all know what's clean and clear. I say it should be these private agencies that do exist, license them. Because as a man who deals a lot with governmental bureaucracies, each one that doesn't exist would make me very happy. Because they just begin and they grow and they go. And pretty soon, you know, the guy with one secretary, all of a sudden, she has her secretary and she has this. Pretty soon you got 28 people and you got all these battles to get simple little documents through. Something we all know and have lived with. So I say, private agency, I don't want a public agency, you license them. Then you set the minimum standards, which would be a physical exam, mental exam, all the screening that anybody thinks is even remotely necessary. Thirdly, which has always been the fact, a surrogate mother must have had and born one child. It's got to be. So then at least she really does know what it's like to have a child. And when she says, I will give up the child upon birth, it will be done. Above all else, immediate delivery of the child. Immediate. There is legislation now in several states that says it's okay as long as the surrogate mother has 30, 45, 60 days to change her mind. I have, in all the places I've gone and talked to, with the huge crowds, I said, raise your hand if you're actually willing to go through all you go through with a surrogate parenting arrangement, and then you're going to wait 9 months as it goes through, waiting and watching, and have your little room all set up, and then the child's born, and then you're going to wait 15, 30, 45 days to find out if your baby's your baby, the only kid you're ever going to have. A, nobody in their right mind would make the deal. B, would make everybody crazy. And C, which never happened in the end case, think about blackmail. You want to think about blackmail? You won't give the baby to us for $10,000? How about 15? How about 20? If it's your only kid in your life, you go to any number. Out of the question. Then as far as payment, there must be payment. And I propose that there be payment as set by statute. No negotiation. Set a figure. You like 10,000, you want 7,500, 12,500, pick a number. Every couple of years, let the legislature meet and change the number if they want. So there's a set number that's acceptable to everybody. And then, if you do that, you've carried it on. Now, there's a couple of tough questions for the 1% cases. And I say let every legislature go crazy with them. There are 3 tough questions in surrogate parenting. One is, must there be medical infertility by the woman? Or in other words, the classic example being, suppose she's a Hollywood model and she says, I never want to be pregnant because it could possibly affect my body and my career. That's 1% of the cases. Decide yes or no, I never lose any sleep over that. Secondly, tougher one. How about heterosexual couple versus homosexual couple? Okay, there most people say no. You wouldn't want to impose that on a kid. Once again, I don't know, but that's 1% again. And then lastly, single parent. Single parent. Can a woman have surrogate parenting because she doesn't want to get married? And then you can break it down to either she's infertile or she's not infertile. But those all add up to 1% of the cases and not of any great consequence. The real bottom line is what's happening right now, which once again absolutely shocks me, except you have small groups of very strongly oriented people who get in there and fight and make a lot of noise, and as a result of that, things happen, even though the great majority may either be neutral or even feel the other way. Your entire adoption groups hate surrogate parenting. I honestly believe they view it as a threat, and that's what it's all about. They will lose a lot of power. Your anti-abortion groups hate surrogate parenting. So they are very active, very well funded, and put a lot of pressure on legislatures. I laugh at the fact that about 1.5 years ago, some senator out of New York State said, New York will have legislation enacted in 90 days, one way or the other. That was 18 months ago. You know where they are? New Jersey, we were the baby M state. You know what we got? More debates coming up. Okay? There are 6 states out of the country. None of them have passed the legislation that I have suggested. Almost all of them will allow it with the 2 impossible factors. No payment to the surrogate mother and a waiting period of 30 days, which to me is the same as totally banning it because it'll never happen. I'll just tell you this in conclusion. Why I know I'm right when I say if we don't enact legislation that will legalize it, it's just going to go on in the back alleys and in the cellars, is that since the MK Supreme Court decision, I have given any number of lectures in any number of places. Afterwards, I go out and I talk, especially to lawyers, who are generally a big part of the audience. They all tell me it's happening. They've had people come to them to draft the agreements. They're doing it without any legislation, or in the states where there's anti-legislation. That there are couples who simply want it, and that's all there is to it. And they're willing to run the risk and go and do what has to be done. Of course, the lawyers will not draft the documents because it's too dangerous for them. And these people go ahead and do it on oral agreements. That's all there is to it. And it's going on regularly throughout the country right now. And that is what's going to happen until the first state legalizes it. And then you're going to see, like, remember Nevada? In the old days, you ran to Nevada to get a divorce? One state totally legalized it. You will see, then they're going to get some statistical idea as to how many people will do anything to have a surrogate child because it will then pick up. In the meantime, we're sitting, we're watching it all go. Nothing's really happening, and the amazing thing is, 42 out of our 50 states still find it such a hot potato that they cannot even touch it. Thank you.
We'll have questions and answers, please, one at a time. Okay.
I don't have any philosophical problems with surrogate parenting per se. And my wife and I also went through the problem of a period of infertility. So I understand the emotional side of it, the family trying to build up. And eventually we're successful with 2 beautiful daughters, and they both have library cards.
That's the most important.
They both have library cards. But I do have 2 problems with the way that the contract is structured, I believe, between
Stern and Whitehead.
Stern and Whitehead. And this is based on what I read, so I
Yeah.
don't know if it's true or not. Number one, that in the event that, well, first of all, if she were to become pregnant after the insemination, then she would have to undergo a physical to determine whether or not the unborn baby was defective.
Yes.
And then he had the right, unilaterally, to abort the baby.
First part right,
Okay.
second part wrong. He had no right to abort the baby. And in all the contracts that we're all talking about, that would not be allowed. All the model surrogacy acts that have been created, okay, say that she will make the determination. She will be in control of her own body, with the exception of that she agrees she will not drink alcohol, take drugs, anything like that.
Yeah, the second part of the problem that I have is that I think the intent of your lecture is good. I mean, basically you're making some very positive points, of 15% infertility and so on and so forth. I think we're overlooking the fact as to why many women are infertile today. And medical evidence points out, for example, is that primary reason for infertility, and I'm speaking to a good friend of mine who's an obstetrician in Summit, is that of the high rate of abortion. That among the women that have abortions, especially those that have multiple abortions, the infertility rate is up to 30 to 40%. So we're dealing with a symptom rather than the cause. So, you know, from his standpoint, it's simply looking upon infertility as a curable behavioral problem that the body has not adjusted to. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, that because a lot of women have abortions,
That's
and
right.
they brought it on themselves.
That's right.
Okay, now I've never heard in all my lectures. Yeah. Let me tell you why, I'm no expert.
Medicine, you
Yeah.
want to
All
talk
right, but I gotta tell
He
you,
doesn't know his statistics.
are you in the medical profession?
No, but I happen to have done the infertility study with one of our leading doctors of infertility in this area, and I've written a paper for him on it and the causes of it, and they would astound you for
But-
some of the reasons.
And it's not much
of hospital. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, I just gotta tell you this, I've done at least 8, 10 medical schools,
Right.
with plenty of doctors who really are anti-surrogacy. Nobody ever raises a major factor, abortions as causing infertility. I'm sure it's one of the many factors, but suppose it even were. Suppose a woman who was 17 and 18 had 2 abortions, and now she can't have kids. You want to draw a line in the legislation that says if she had 1 abortion, she can't be involved in a surrogate?
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I didn't say that. All I'm simply saying one of the reasons why normally 1 out of 6 couples can't have a baby. That's a statistic that's thrown around. But among women that do elect to have multiple abortions, I'm not talking about 1.
Increase.
I'm talking about, okay.
Yeah.
The rate of infertility rises by step function.
Right.
The women are not getting warning signals. You know, one day you like to have the procedure. The doctor should tell them, the lady, I want you to know that if you do it again, the following may happen, and don't come back to me and say, look, I want a baby and I can't have a baby.
Well, I sure could see as an educational process, giving that as a warning about having
That's what I'm
abortion.
saying.
Okay. But it's gotta be AFAB. Sir?
What is your feeling about the mother who acted as a surrogate mother for her daughter?
You want me to give you a real answer?
Yeah.
Nobody in this country really knows how often that is happening. Okay? I am convinced, second only to sisters, okay? There are mothers much more than anybody knows who are doing it as the safest way, other than a sister or the very closest friend, that you would not then have a surrogate child born and then have to give the child up. It's happening a lot more. As far as I'm concerned, it wouldn't be my choice as the way to go, but when you're desperate, you're desperate. And you sure know that you can trust your mother more than you can trust anybody other than a sibling. And it doesn't cost you $10,000. This woman definitely was a banker. Yes.
Aside from the ethical and moral issues which are debatable, I find it extremely difficult to understand how any woman will do this for $10,000. And you say they have to be very stable, they're carefully tested and screened and all that. And yet, to me, $10,000 for 9 months of carrying a child and getting sick and putting your life on the line is really chicken feed. I think it's, I mean, if you're just talking about dollars and cents, it's not worth it.
You know,
Taking a special days for $10,000.
in the Supreme Court brief, Karcher, who I think is also running for governor, he made the argument that, in effect, Mary Beth was earning less than the minimum wage
Exactly.
on a computation of 24 hours a day, 9 months. Yeah, and then you can argue the marketplace factor, except then only the very rich can ever do it. And there's no question that if we're money alone, see, I don't believe that any woman would do it for money alone.
Not very profitable.
No, I am really convinced that it's a combination of, and remember, Mary Beth Whitehead had an infertile sister. She had an infertile sister, which is what convinced Stern that she really was going to be okay. Because then she knew, as a matter of fact, she testified that she had offered to be a surrogate mother for her own sister. But her sister said she didn't want to do it for a variety of reasons with sister to sister. That was why Stern was convinced, A, she needed the money, and B, she knew the pain of infertility. Her own sister couldn't have a child. And therefore would do it with also, you've got to have heart. It's got to be two things. You can use the money, and you're really doing something. You're making a really dramatic contribution to somebody else's happiness. You can't see it, and believe me, most cannot. But there are some, and I've been on these TV talk programs for the month after the trial with a lot of surrogate mothers who really talked to me that they thought it was the best thing they've ever done in their lives. That they made the one real contribution on planet Earth. They really gave a couple everything they wanted.
They claim the money is very
No, but they claimed the money was definitely significant, but that it was much more than just the money. That's the ones who totally feel good about it. Let me just roll on. Sir.
In this involved and complicated question, I was just wondering whether the problem of AIDS may enter into it in some way, shape, or form.
No, they are tested.
Only because it's the first test they do. The answer is no. The first thing they look for today is AIDS. So in that sense, you're very safe.
Is there any Talmudic studies on this
Oh.
vast subject?
I'm not good on this stuff. Let me tell you, one program that I was on in right here in New Jersey, in Secaucus, I had an Orthodox rabbi who said, adultery, it is on the program. And he said that it's from an Orthodox viewpoint, it violates Talmudic law. Now, I think it's only the more extreme position. But best of all, we walked off, I looked at him and said, he was a great guy. I said, Rabbi, do me a favor. If what you say is really right, will you do me a favor and pray for me? He looks at me and he says, Skoloff, he says, I ain't got enough years left to pray for. But I said, great, smile, and we shook hands, and that was the end. Yes. Yes. Okay.
On this particular problem, because first of all, I've done some Talmudic law over the school in New York. But secondly, I call your attention, most of you are Bible reading people. Open to the Genesis. Sarah, first mother of Israel. You're saying, who was Hagar?
Right.
Surrogate mother. And she threw her out. And maybe she threw her out, which happens. Could happen here too. But remember that Ishmael had 12 children who were the tribes of Israel. In our Bible, absolutely authentic. And under the Talmud, there are many, many opinions. But basically they come back to if it was good enough for God to accept it and to recognize Isaac and to recognize Ishmael, who are we to question it? Therefore, that Orthodox rabbi should be sent back to his source.
I want you
And secondly, because the problem has come up not only from the surrogate motherhood thing, but the in vitro, in the saucer birth has been accepted as, in vitro insemination. Even that has been accepted because our Bible, and that's the Bible for all of us, says that life supersedes anything else. If you are an Orthodox Jew, you may eat anything. And remember our prohibition against not eating anything. But for life, you may. Anything for life. And this is life.
I want you to know that we put that into our brief to the New Jersey Supreme Court. They
Right
didn't
on.
buy
They
it.
didn't buy
Yes.
it.
I don't know whether
Yes.
they bought it or not.
They did.
We'll go to the Orthodox rabbi.
My concern is that this becomes big business, and I want to preface that with a little personal story. We were concerned in Planned Parenthood because there were so many young girls in Pennsylvania and down south, young white girls who were having illegitimate children at the age of 12 and 13. And innocently enough, I guess, or ignorantly enough, I said to one of our group, we ought to do a real campaign there in birth control. So she said to me, she's one of the leaders in the country, she said, Jimmy, you don't know what you're talking about. This is big business. And when the girls reach puberty, they're encouraged by their families to have a baby because there are lawyers that come down from up north, and especially if the baby's blonde and white, of course, and those babies bring in $10,000, $14,000, and the family eats that. And so this is, I prefaced it with this. Now, how are you going to prevent this from becoming a business? That's my question.
She makes a very good point, okay? And it's got to be carefully regulated. But if it's going to go on, I'd rather have it carefully regulated than not regulated. But she's absolutely right. As you live in fear of this business of the rich exploiting the poor, which is always a danger, okay? And you just got to handle it with as much regulation as you can. But it's a very valid, probably the most valuable argument. Yes.
Should a surrogate mother deliver a baby's delivered and it is abnormal? What's the decision on that?
The biological father must take the child. It was true in the Stern-Whitehead contract. Contrary to what they argued it wasn't, we always said that was always our obligation. And in the Uniform Acts, several of which have now been passed, all of them say the baby goes to the father, healthy, not healthy, and totally his responsibility. No responsibility on the surrogate mother. Yes.
Isn't in vitro method worthy of consideration because you still have one natural donor and you have no other person involved and you eliminate. Now, I've often thought in this Whitehead case, the Whitehead Stern case, that in the future, if there should be a little dissension about discipline method or something, the father could conceivably say, hey, this is my child, not yours. I think it could do something to a marriage, and in the in vitro, it would not because you have a blind donor as the don't you think that's
It's a viable alternative.
Yes.
And by the way, we also talked about this. Just suppose, God forbid, Mr. Stern passed away. And especially shortly after the case was over. And then you've got her raising a child, but you've got a natural mother who was saying, so we looked upon that. Yep. Right. See, but this way you at least know who the mother is. There is such a fear today about just drugs, alcohol.
Could that be monitored?
I don't think the test can tell you. You got to test the woman. Although I'm not sure 10 years from now all this may be quite academic the way
They may not
our.
accept the donation until the woman has been tested.
Yeah, that could be it. That could be an approach. I mean, we're in a whole hinterland of science.
Gary, I'd like to ask you if the Baby M case was per se the wrong case to try. In other words, there were a lot of factors that, had they been on a different basis, where religion, where economic situation, where it wasn't
As
controlled.
extreme.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could maybe the laws have been, everything could have been changed in light of a different story.
If things had been different, starting with her not taking the child to Florida, which really set the case totally off of kilter, right, having 2 children of her own. It could have been that the trial judge would have ended up where the Supreme Court was.
That's what.
It could be. It could be. Except the fact is that you still got to come to grips with some kind of legislation that gets it put together where everybody knows what's going on and where you know what you're doing and what the result's going to be. in which you do allow surrogate parenting. Because if you don't allow it by law, you're going to get it anyway, the wrong way.
Karen,
Yeah.
I have a question. We have seen in this last couple of years, not too many, but just a couple of years, an increasing anti-abortion groups becoming, as you have said, stronger and stronger. What can we, as women who are aware of this, do not to force ourselves back into the position that we were in my day as a young woman,
Absolutely.
where the back alley doctor,
You got it.
whom we didn't want, and our lives on the line, because the statistic was very clear that more women died in childbirth than ever died as for being aborted.
Mhm.
What can we do to stem this tide of men trying to grab hold of our own freedom of choice?
Men and
Men
boy,
and
you
women.
got
The women
it.
are worse than the men.
There are zealots out there. See, I don't like extremists of the right or left. You give me an extremist, they make me nervous, okay? And these are extremists who, a very small number, but have become so powerful because they spend day and night doing it and raise a little bit of money, while the rest of us who really are totally in favor of abortion. But you know, we don't join groups, we don't contribute money. I think what you got to do is join some kind of a group, at least give it some kind of support, a pro-abortion group, because the anti-abortion groups are powerful.
You know, can I make a comment to that? I just recently saw an article in the New England Journal of Medicine. I don't think that anybody's going to doubt that it's a highly respectable medical journal. And it dealt with the morbidity rates from childbirth and from several various other factors, including abortion. And I was absolutely thunderstruck, really, by a statistic that the morbidity rate is 6 per 100,000 in abortion versus 2 per 100,000 in childbirth.
A complete reversal from what it was? I'd like to read the statistic again, because it never was that way.
Well, I was
More
very
women
surprised.
dying
I
in
was very
childbirth.
surprised. I was very surprised. I only mentioned it to you because I was very surprised. Now, regardless what position you take or what position I take, I'm simply stating the fact. And again, I've had a number of conversations with my friend, with a doctor who's in this business, and he, tells me every once in a while certain facts. Now, he didn't tell me this fact himself. I happened to pick it up by looking at the article. And he's saying that a lot of women are not getting counseling in a range of medical services that deals with the female problems, not just abortion per se. And the consequential medical damages become irreversible later because of improper and inadequate counseling by the medical professionals.
Well, aren't the schools doing a lot of counseling now?
Apparently
I
not
understand.
according to him.
No? Boy, I understand schools are into it right and left like never before.
Well,
I mean, can you imagine in our days, did they give you protective devices when we were in school? They would have shot you. If my father ever saw me carrying around a kid in prophylactic, he would have probably put a bullet through it. And now they give them out of school. I love it. It's like another world. Yes.
You were quoting various reasons why this rate of fertility is rising, so on.
Infertility.
Infertility.
Right,
Yeah.
infertility. And how do you explain the high rate of fertility among the lower classes? They're having a lot of babies, whereas the upper class women are not.
No. It's still happening to them, too. It's happening to them, too. It's just that so many of the lower class are not married, and therefore causing that kind of don't have the money to take care of the
But they
children.
still, you see them with 5 and 6
Yes,
children.
but that's one woman, 5 or 6. But I'm telling you, the increase cuts across all lines of women. That's clear in all the medical
But if you
things
do it
that I went
according
through.
to socioeconomic
No,
classes,
no.
you would find more children in the lower classes.
Yeah,
That's
because when you go and take a vacation to Acapulco, they don't have the money, so they just go into the back of the car. Yes.
I have read that the amount of protein that a woman takes in affects her fertility rate, and that this is why India, for instance, the poor have so many children, is because they have less of a protein intake. And that is why in some of the countries that are more prosperous, the fertility rate is lower because they have a higher protein. intake. Now, I tell you, I read it.
That I can never comment. I got enough trouble with surrogacy. I see your Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to send you a fertility rate.
I don't agree with your premise that because people are going to do something anyway, that you should allow illegal. And I see that they're using now with the alcohol, you know, during their prohibition time. Well, they're going to smuggle it anyway, so we'll make it legal. We'll make gambling legal because people are going to do it anyway. Well, then why not make rape legal and stealing legal and everything else? Because people are doing it anyway. I mean, these are evil things. They're alternatives. I have a cousin, and for 14 years they were trying to have a baby. And they tried everything and couldn't. They went to Poland, and they got 2 little children over there. No problem. 3 of their parents weren't even Polish. Went to Poland and got 3 children. In Europe, there are a lot of children that are war-torn, or there's no one, you know, and they'll be more receptive to giving children. And they could use homes. Why go using artificial means or things that aren't natural? And, you know, I mean, there's other alternatives, better ones. I mean, these children aren't being taken care of because people are using surrogate. You know, there's a loss there.
Let me respond to you. Because I understand what you're saying. If you really do feel that it's evil, then I can totally follow. But you see, okay, to some it is and to some it isn't. But let me say this: you can't equate alcohol, drugs, and even surrogacy with rape and murder. Okay, because one is
They're trying to legalize that.
they're trying to legalize
Sure.
drugs.
And they tried legalizing prostitution. They have Las Vegas, but I mean, you know, it's accepted. It's not put in jail.
But these are, you see, the real problem that's so difficult for the legislature and the courts is adult consensual activity. Where do you draw the line between what they're going to let you and me do? If we don't harm any third person in this room, well, that's the question. Are you harming a baby? You're creating a baby. But is it harmful to a baby to create a baby who a couple wants? And by the way, I got too many friends who tried to adopt. Nobody's ever told me you can go to Poland and adopt. Where?
To Taiwan from Holland. They can't even adopt children in Holland.
Tehran. Chile is the only place that I am now told people are going to adopt. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Hop up.
I was going to ask you, shouldn't there be a big concern about, we're not talking about infertile women, but career women? It would be so easy to say, I want a baby, but I have to go to the office on my career, blah, blah, blah. And just for $10,000, we can get ourselves a baby.
Remember, I said to you, when I went through the 3 1%ers, I said that's the first one. Does she have to be medically infertile, or can any woman who just decides she doesn't want the inconvenience do it? But you know, you really got to figure. Can you imagine what minimal percentage of women would not want to have their own baby? Got to be very, very minimal. Yes.
When you speak on the Stern case, now, as I understand it, it stayed with the fact that Mrs. Whitehead, who now has a new name, Gould, Mrs. Gould, has the visitation rights to this baby. Now, how much harm is that doing to that child?
A lot.
You sure know the arguments I made.
That's what I wanted to say.
We'll know a long time in the future. I made all those arguments, and boy, it sure fell on deaf ears. Yes.
Was Mrs. Stern,
Louder.
was Mrs. Stern infertile?
Yes, oh yes. She was found by the court to be medically infertile. By that. Yes. It was there are 5 definitions of medical infertility. She was found to be medically infertile in that the disease that she had was in the year that she decided not to become pregnant, a serious medical problem by the medical literature with a real danger of permanent blindness or permanent paralysis, that the trial court ruled, the Supreme Court affirmed that she was medically infertile in that sense of the word, in the legal definition.
Wasn't there a big maybe from everything I've read? And believe me, Whitehead, as far as I'm concerned, is in this only for the money. but I don't think that you could call Mrs. Stern completely without any blemishes, because it was a big maybe. I can understand her not wanting to give birth to a child and then become paralyzed or blind or something.
Yeah, we litigated for 2 days.
Infertile.
Well, once again, there's 5 different definitions of medical infertility, and the trial judge picked the one that included a severe medical problem that could cause a very serious after effect of birth. So she was determined to be medically infertile, but you're correct if you're saying that it was not actual infertility as we talk about it, but a medical problem. Yeah.
The thing that troubles me a little about is you would just set a fee for the surrogacy.
Right.
Then how would civil rights group be reacting to this? They'd say, well, it's not fair to us. We can't afford the $10,000, so the government has to subsidize us so we can have a surrogate baby too. It's not fair to us. Whereas the other people can afford it.
The same way that if you come down with some terrible, God forbid, heart problem, and you can afford it, do you go to Texas, where they went, 8 years ago, and sure as hell to New York City now? You pick and choose. You don't care about the expense of the hospital if you can afford it. If you cannot, then medically you're going to take a lesser medical situation.
Do you think Medicare will ultimately pay for it?
That's it. Nobody's ever asked that question before. I will get that into my next. I am going to Australia to talk about services. They're very much into it. I will absolutely raise that one in Australia. And they have something similar for Medicare. Yes.
That's one question.
Yes.
Many studies have been done on these surrogate mothers with babies, on the impact as they grow up and they develop, when they know that a natural mother will carry them. They do not know. That's fine.
The answer is no. There's been no study made for the obvious reason that it's still too new and not enough. Are there many, many mental health people who are itching to do it at the first opportunity? Yes. Will they get to do it? I don't know, because I bet you that the parents are going to shield the kids tremendously. But someday, somewhere, the first studies will start to be. They came out of the trial, there have been no studies because they've just not been able to do it. Yes.
If it was written into the contract between Mary Beth Whitehead and the Stearns that she would give up the baby upon birth and then changed her mind, what is to say that this is not a perpetual problem, and contract or no contract, it's a question of self-determination.
I didn't hear the last part.
Self-determination on the part of the mother who bore that child to keep that baby despite all the contractual agreements that she had made.
That's the primary argument made.
That's right. And
on behalf of Mary Beth, and what the Supreme Court felt was a very significant
From my
argument.
knowledge of adoption, of women who have babies that they give up for adoption, if they keep them for a certain period of time, they are more loath to part with that baby than if they give them up immediately.
Absolutely. That to me makes all the sense in the world. Right. There are 7 justices in New Jersey agree with you 100%.
I say no. I
They
was
said
trying to adopt a pair of brothers. We couldn't afford it because we just had the one child of 8. And those 2 children were raised by our nurse who made the business to bring them from New York City, from the orphanages, and really treat them badly, these children. I would have loved to have taken them, couldn't afford 3 pairs of shoes at the time. To this day, I regret it. That's a different story. The father did not want those children. There was no mother. But you go and get a woman pregnant and go through this process. What is the gain? And the child knows that she'll be unhappy or he'll be unhappy.
Are you sure the child will be unhappy?
I've seen it. I've seen it.
Okay. Yes.
I just want to ask a little question. I said before she had 2 children, Mary Beth Whitehead.
Yes.
And ethically, I mean, then after she had the 2 children and she was fighting to keep this little child, she went with Carter's wife to the islands, and she met that good man there, and she became pregnant before she got married. Now she has his child, and the court still doesn't ethically forbid her to see that child. This is something I don't understand.
You got it. You got 4 kids. You got 4 kids now. Yes, sir.
Your knowledge, how big is the underground in selling babies? I understand many people resort to it.
You understand?
Many people do resort to it because of the impediments thrown in their path.
Absolutely. There is an underground. Okay, there's no question about it. How big it is, nobody really knows. Because of course it's not organized. It's very disorganized. In the same sense that how many surrogate parenting situations are at this moment in existence in the United States? Nobody can know. Nobody will ever know because it's all individual or in very small groups. But it really does exist simply because infertile couples go nuts until they get a baby. That is it. Yes.
I cannot blame a lot of the people who only want babies and they cannot have their own. But there are so many children who are waiting to be adopted and they're not babies, or there's something wrong, or they're the wrong color, and nobody wants them.
That's the saddest thing in the world. And it's true, but is that an argument that therefore you're going to declare surrogacy?
Oh, I'm all for surrogacy.
But look,
I could have made a living if I was smart in my
Infertility Center in New Jersey, you would have had it, right? Yes.
There has been a strong move for the right to know on the part of children who have been adopted.
Yeah.
Yes. How about surrogacy?
Will it start to happen?
Problem with that?
Yeah. Frankly, I think that every parent is going to tell their children that you came out of a surrogacy arrangement, only because it's going to be impossible to ever conceal. There's always too many people who would know that one. And so they got to tell them at some point. And
the same as adoption.
it's going to happen. So they're going to know eventually if they want them. Sir.
What the narrow legal issue the following, namely that the contract was simply not enforceable. The reason I'm asking the question is that in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco, there's recently a contract between two banks, totally unrelated to surrogacy or adoption or anything.
I hope so. If it's two banks.
And one bank simply refused to honor the other.
The little bank.
Sperm bank.
Oh, we're getting through it.
And one bank simply refused to honor the contract.
Yeah.
Went to the circuit court. And I read the thing about it in the contract. I shook my head and said, how come you can write a contract that's not enforceable? And I remembered that I bought $20,000 worth of Washington Public Power Supply municipal bonds. They defaulted.
Right.
And of course they walked away on the ground. It was not enforceable.
Right.
So, wasn't that really the narrow legal issue?
Yeah, they did. They said that it was against public policy and therefore unenforceable.
Yeah, but consequently, based on the Ninth Circuit Court, you could have the world's greatest contract, and both parties can sign the contract, and then one party on the grounds of logical inconsistency can back out of it at any future time.
Oh, but you know how tough it is to do that. Come on, you got to have it's one contract out of 10,000 gets declared unenforceable.
Circuit Court said.
Yeah, and what happened here was if it's against public policy, but very unique, rarely happens. Yes.
The thing that you mentioned, one of the guarantees or what to make a surrogacy contract or powers or whatever you want to call it, is that the surrogate mother would have to go through physical tests, mental tests, and so on. Now, those mental tests, I mean, how reliable are they? You get so many different opinions from so-called mental experts.
Do I hear you?
I would consider...
Do I hear you? Every contested custody case that I try.
So, I mean,
He says the father should be the one who should have custody because the mother's nuts. The other one gets up and says the mother should have custody because the father's nuts. And the judge sits there saying we're all nuts. And then they go through an entire day, but we did 32 tests and it proves she's crazy, but we did 36 tests and he's crazy. You got it. But what do you got better? What you'll do is certain basics really do work, and after a certain level it doesn't work. And we'll never talk about 100% success rate, which exists nowhere, because when you get down to it, who's the only perfect person you know? Me. Right? Nobody else.
It just seems to me that any woman who would go into a surrogate motherhood type of situation, there must be something wrong.
No, unique, not wrong. Something unique. See, I say any man or woman who jumps out of planes with parachutes, okay? Which they do that in Lakewood all the time. When I drove by a few weeks, I said, every one of them's got to be nuts. What's the kick out of going out of a plane that if ever God forbid it doesn't open, it's all over? I think they're nuts, but they would cancel with that. They're unique.
So she wants to help, that means she has a Messiah.
Well, whatever.